The story begins with our hero, Sven, entering a sentence to create an in-game avatar. He wants his character to be completely perfect, with no kinds of weaknesses, and even smiles, thinking that he's going to get what he wants. Sven is immediately brought back to reality when the AI game tells him that his description is a bit too vague. Now, he tries entering a sentence that allows him to get all the girls as an overpowered hero. However, the AI game decides to troll Sven this time by saying heroes aren't really needed anymore, and he should really look forward to something more rewarding than a harem. Our hero doesn't really like the condescending attitude the game is giving him, so he instinctively says that he'll become a villain instead. This is something the game can work with, and then we see the AI in the form of a horned man with a monocle. Sven wishes to get his character created, but the server gives him a ton of problems, and it leads to a delay. While he waits for his update, we see a horned girl waking up from her nap. She is awakened by the AI, who refers to her as Your Majesty. The girl is a bit amused to see her AI slave without his shirt on, but he reasons that he's writing a romance novel, so he needs to set the right mood. Now, the girl learns about Sven, who is a new candidate from her world who is entering the gaming world of Ark Shul. She is told that Sven has been selected for over 2 hours, and it makes her go crazy. She even smacks her AI slave with her foot, but he reassures her that 2 hours in this world is the same as 2 minutes on Earth. That's when we learn that the AI slave is intentionally showing a server error message to Sven so that he can bide for some time. The girl is a little surprised that her fellow human is so patient, because she would have smashed the game to pieces if she was in his place. In another plot reveal, we learn that the girl is lost inside the gaming world because she had created the Earth gateway to enter the game and couldn't find a way out. As Sven considers whether to restart the game, the girl mentions that he might be the key towards her making it back to Earth as a human. She decides not to waste any more time and heads off to the control panel to regain her freedom. The AI slave has no option but to nod in approval and follow his queen. Here, she grants the approval to Sven to enter the fantasy world of Orion as a villain. He is overjoyed to finally get accepted, and his body begins to transform into the villain he had decided from before. Sven is given a pretty decent look, and then he has a look at his character description. We learn that he comes from a race of Ark ghouls, who had terrorized Orion at one point in time, but was defeated by a hero known as Crimson Phantom and his guild. However, he has now been reborn, so our hero completely turns into a villain and checks out his new stats. Sven is told that he's the new final boss, so he figures he must be overpowered to a completely different level. However, when he opens up the screen, he sees that he's only level 1, even though he belongs to the legendary class. He clearly doesn't have any answers to all the questions popping in his head, and wonders whether he made the right choice. This is bad news for the girl, because Sven can end all her hopes simply by quitting the game. The AI slave isn't going to let his mistress weep in sadness, so acts fast and changes his voice before demanding Sven to reveal his name. The final boss is a bit shocked to hear this, because it's not the same as the one greeting him into the game. Anyway, Sven figures he should play along, so he makes a formal introduction. Now, the AI slave decides to spice things up by asking Sven if there's anything he desires as part of being a final boss in Orion. This makes the villain boy squeal in excitement, because he simply came across the game on the dark web and wanted a fresh experience to rejuvenate his life. Sven even considers the possibility of being paid real money for playing the final boss character, but as he fantasizes about his ideal situation, the girl gets to work and makes use of her time to trap Sven in the game, just like she was. The AI slave has no idea what she's doing, but figures it's best not to meddle in things he doesn't understand. Now, Sven is offered $1 for turning into a villain, and he calls out the game for being cheap. However, he is told that his rewards will increase along with the difficulty of his missions, so he thinks it's a fair deal. To add on to this, Sven is also warned against revealing any of his exploits to the outside world, because what happens in Orion stays in Orion. The AI slave also explains that the reason behind this is because the dark web isn't like the surface web, as people get to participate in all kinds of twisted actions here, considering they have full anonymity. Sven doesn't really care for redundant cliches, but doesn't have anything better to do either, so he decides to take the risk and accepts the $1 to get officially transformed into the final boss of Orion. The $1 gets credited into Sven's Bitcoin wallet, so he believes he can make a career out of playing this game. The AI slave states that Sven won't hear his voice again, and gives the excuse of a server restriction. He doesn't care about any of these unnecessary details, but the real shocker arrives when at the last moment, Twist reveals that Sven will lose his own money if he dies, refuses to do a quest. Our hero doesn't agree to this, but it's too late as he gets teleported to the world of Orion. Now, we see a girl named Eve, who's more than excited to be a part of the Adventurers Guild. Her joy is quite prominent and can be seen by the Chief Elder and his buddies who are drinking at the bar. They congratulate Eve for her achievements and ask her to remember them when she becomes rich and famous. Eve is a bit too generous, as she promises her elders 80% of her loot bounties right till the day she dies. This is because she wants to thank the Chief Elder for helping her out through the tougher times in her life. The Chief Elder and his buddies get excited over the prospect of extra cash, but they are also worried for Eve, because being an adventurer is the most dangerous job in the world. There's no stopping Eve, because she really wants to become an adventure girl, so the Chief Elder and his buddies decide against trying to convince her not to opt for this life. Eve gets emotional as she bids farewell to all the people of her village who have supported her thoroughly, right from when she was a little child. This causes tears to fall out from her eyes. So the Chief Elder goes to Eve and says that she must focus on igniting her passion, as it will be the key towards her success. The entire bar gets emotionally charged, and they wish Eve all the best for her new life, much to her happiness and joy. It also calls for an alcohol-fueled celebration, so everyone gets drunk while Eve sets out on her new journey. Before leaving the village for good, Eve wants to visit a special place for one last time. She enters a dead dungeon against the scary backdrop of a lonely night and makes her way forward, thinking that there won't be any final bosses or monsters to deal with over here. Eve explains to us that she used to come here as a kid quite often, which is why she associates the dungeon with fond memories. After mentioning how dungeon monsters don't usually appear in places like this, Eve heads to her secret hideout spot, which she claims is her own personal haven. There's a bed over here which Eve uses to recover from all the fatigue of her long and tired journey. It seemingly does the trick and helps Eve, although she's not sure whether the effect is real or simply a placebo. Regardless, she falls into the bed and gets cozy so that she can enjoy this feeling one last time. However, before she can experience her version of heaven on earth, she can feel an earthquake around the dungeon, so she holds onto her bed for support. That's when a giant ball breaks into the dungeon and completely wrecks it, along with Eve's hideout spot. The ball is revealed to be housing Sven, who breaks out of it and holds onto Eve in a dominating position. This scares the adventure girl, who isn't even able to understand the gibberish that Sven is speaking. It calls for a rather awkward and uncomfortable situation. Sven doesn't let go of Eve and continues to cry about his money, so she tries to talk to him. However, even he isn't able to understand a single word she says, and it makes things even trickier for the both of them. Our hero doesn't realize that his head is resting between some very human pillows, and Eve has to bear with the discomfort for now. Sven realizes that Eve is speaking a foreign language, and he finds it commendable that the VR game is able to include such detailed information. He expresses his approval of the game because he thinks that his consciousness has been transferred to the final boss body. However, Eve starts crying in front of Sven, while he still has no clue about what she's saying. Our hero is puzzled that the creators weren't able to create a language that he could understand, so he goes up close to Eve to assess her body. As expected, Sven likes what he sees, and can even smell Eve's warm breath, although he feels that her behavior is more of an AI trait than a human one. Eve seems to react to this statement, and she quickly blurts something and runs away in fear. This is quite confusing for Sven, and he doesn't realize that there's a giant dragon monster standing right behind him, even though such beasts are rare in this area. It takes a while, but Sven eventually turns around and witnesses the dragon angrily roaring in front of him. It makes sense as to why Eve ran away, but all Sven can do right now is stand in fear. The dragon decides to give Sven a taste of his physical strength, so he smacks the ground, and our hero manages to avoid the blow and runs away in a manner that definitely doesn't exude final boss vibes. He catches up to Eve in the middle of the chase and comments that he's not going to let the dragon take his money away. Sven even overtakes Eve in the process, and then we see the AI slave watching the entertainment along with his mistress, who comments on Eve's rotten luck. Her slave reassures her that everything is going as per the plan, and she simply needs to visualize whatever's going to happen next. Now, the mistress finally reveals her slave's name to be Ark, and questions him about Sven's chances of being able to conquer the dungeon, thus freeing her from this imprisonment. Ark doesn't look too optimistic about Sven's chances, but does mention that the final boss has the capacity to come out on top, even though he might only be at a level 1 for now. This isn't very reassuring for the mistress, and she reveals that she's actually more worried for Eve because she's a human girl who will straight away die if anything were to happen to her. Ark remains emotionally cold and tells his queen that she shouldn't waste her life force worrying about such a small issue. In another twist to the tale, Ark reveals to us that he was the previous final boss on Orion and has now given up his title to Sven because he knows what he's capable of. The mistress doesn't want Eve to meet her end just yet, so she decides to give Sven a new mission. A screen pops up in front of the final boss telling him that he must save the damsel in distress for a reward of $2,000 and a further bonus of $10,000. He can even die as many times as he wants in order to complete this mission. But the catch is that if he allows Eve to die, then all the existing money from his bank account is going to be wiped out in an instant. Seeing this potential reward money makes Sven's face light up, and he instantly switches from a scared chicken to a noble gentleman. He puts on a smolder as he declares Eve to be a fine lady and offers his hand to help her out. Eve simply ignores Sven as she's got the bloodthirsty dragon to worry about. It's humiliating for the final boss, but he allows the embarrassment because he still considers Eve to be an AI being. Now, he stands tall in front of the dragon beast and decides to have a little tutorial session with him. The dragon is about to land a devastating blow, but Sven is prepared to take it, as he knows he's immortal for this mission. He thinks that he'll buy some time for Eve by dying multiple times, but to his surprise, she comes back and saves him from the dragon's deadly might. Sven laments that Eve has wasted her time and energy by doing this, and then he thinks of a way to combat the dragon while also avoiding death, primarily because he doesn't know how long it might take for him to respawn. With nothing else in mind, Sven decides to seriously fight the dragon, because it's still better than going back to his boring life as a corporate slave. On top of that, the prospect of telling his office boss to get lost gives Sven a lot of additional motivation. Now, the final boss stands with Eve next to him and prepares to take on the overpowered dragon, because he is confident that he can beat him with his sheer force of will. And that's the end of part 1. Like, share, and subscribe to see the rest of the story. See you soon!